Recently, on November 23rd, some Chinese media networks spread an article with the question, "Is Vietnam stupid to buy F-16 from the U.S.?" The relationship between the U.S. and Vietnam has been raised to two consecutive levels. It's time to talk about the U.S. selling F-16 to Vietnam. It is said that the order can be completed by 2024. Of course, F-16 delivery by 2024 is impossible under any circumstances. The U.S. Air Force has long stopped buying new F-16s, and all those currently in production are for the export market. Delivery of the F-16 is impossible without prior production planning. There's no way to jump in line. Furthermore, export fighter aircraft are a bit similar to passenger aircraft in that they are mass-produced, but in reality, each specific customer has its own requirements. Therefore, there cannot be F-16 early next year for Vietnam. In fact, deliveries before 2030 are considered fast. The F-16 has been in production for more than 40 years. The first-generation AB and second-generation CD versions have been discontinued for a long time. Now they only produce the EF generation. It is sometimes called the F-16V. Anyway, the U.S. Air Force itself doesn't use this type, so it doesn't matter what the manufacturer wants to call it. Whether EF or V, the latest F-16 uses increased thrust engines, so weight increases, but does not reduce the thrust-to-weight ratio. However, the wing area does not change, but increasing weight will increase the load of the wing, losing maneuverability. Fortunately, the F-16V is equipped with an active phased array radar with outstanding performance, and its airborne electronic warfare capabilities are significantly increased, so the overall combat performance is improved. The Vietnamese Air Force has long been dominated by Soviet-made fighter jets, and the American-style fighter jets obtained in 1975 have long been eliminated. The 35 Su-30 Mk2s are currently the most advanced fighter aircraft of the Vietnam Air Force. Their features are generally upgraded compared to China's Su-30 Mkk, but their basic features are almost equivalent. Compared to the F-16V, the Su-30 Mk2 is inferior in electronic systems, but is better in weapon load and flight range. Regarding opponents, the goals of the Vietnam Air Force are relatively complex. There is no threat from Laos and Cambodia. The Philippines is too far away, and without a decent air force, does not pose any threat. Malaysia and Indonesia are also very far away. Only the East Sea has the potential for conflict. But the F-16 is not good at long-range combat at sea. However, there may be a slight threat to Vietnam from Thailand. Thailand's F-16AB may not be able to suppress the Su-30 Mk2, but the Gripen fighter may have an advantage in air combat capabilities, especially the ability to fight beyond visual range after being equipped, was hit by an AIM-120 missile. But Thailand is a close ally of the U.S. The U.S. does not provide F-16s to Vietnam to deal with Thailand. The target here is China. The problem is that the F-16V is a worthy opponent of dozens of J-10Cs. These two types of aircraft are inherently of equal quality. But if you compare the F-16V with the J-16 fighter, which is a copy of the Su-30 Mkk in China, the Chinese fighter model has a much better advantage. The J-16 also has an active phased array radar. The basic technology is the same, but the performance and antenna size are most important. The J-16's antenna is nearly 1 meter in diameter, so the F-16V's radar is difficult to compare. And if the F-16V encounters the J-20, that is a generational difference that a small upgrade in avionics cannot compensate for. What's even more terrible is that from Yunnan, Guangxi to Hainan, most of Vietnam's territory is under the firepower of China's long-range land attacks. This type of firepower, which was intended to prepare Japan and Taiwan, is simply not something Vietnam can handle. No matter how many F-16Vs there are, they cannot take off and cannot play their role. There are also major problems with ammunition systems, pilot training, and aircraft maintenance. The Vietnamese Air Force has used Russian Soviet fighter aircraft and ammunition for decades. After switching to the F-16V, ammunition must be used by the U.S. This is not only a huge expense, but also a new technical requirement. Pilot training also needs to be reviewed. The Ukrainian Air Force is facing similar problems. The most important thing is, spending a lot of money does not solve any problems, but also creates big problems. The U.S. hopes to use the F-16V to entice Vietnam, forming a circle to encircle China. First, Vietnam may not be willing. Second, America lacks sincerity. Remember, 40 years ago, the U.S. intended to use the F-16 to draw China into a military alliance against the Soviet Union. At that time, the F-16 was truly advanced, and China had enough power to fight the Soviet Union. 40 years later, the U.S. still wants to use F-16 to entice Vietnam, but Vietnam does not have enough strength to fight China in terms of scale. Such lack of sincerity is very disrespectful to Vietnam. Take it seriously. Not to mention, currently, the technical and equipment level of the Vietnamese army is basically the same as in the 70s and 80s. But the technical and equipment level of the Chinese army is almost equal to that of the U.S. It is true that the Vietnamese army defeated the U.S. army, but China will not enter Vietnam to fight guerrillas. Moreover, at that time, without the support of the Soviet Union and China, it would have been much more difficult for Vietnam to fight the U.S. For Vietnam, the biggest question is what to use these F-16Vs for. Whether in quantity or quality, it cannot beat China. Why are there still conflicts with China? Vietnam has a dispute with China, but has carefully controlled it for many years, because Vietnam knows that all problems with China can only be resolved politically. Whether on land, sea, or air, a military solution is not feasible. Therefore, the quasi-alliance, symbolized by the F-16, has no effect at all. The U.S. even refused to promise to send troops to protect Ukraine and Taiwan, so Vietnam does not need to think. Considering the specific geographical reality of Vietnam, the U.S. will not send troops to protect it.